On the internet, you might run into a few self-proclaimed alpha males, but given that only about 5,000 true alphas are born each century, how can you tell the real ones from vicious imposters? Well, by studying other metazoans, we can determine a simple guide on how to spot a fake alpha male. So just keep watching. So first off, we'll start with a simple definition. After tedious combing through studies of elephant seals, wolves, fish, insects, and primates, the scientific community came to the conclusion that dominance hierarchies vary way too much between species, and they stopped using the term alpha male. So I guess that would be the first sign. If someone calls themselves an alpha male, it's probably a good indication that they're not. That term carries with it the implication that social structures are comparable between species, which is at best misleading, and just flat out wrong at worst. But this is a video about definitions, and we still need one. So, for the purposes of this video, an alpha is any male who has sex, or will have sex. Any male who is a member of the effective population, which is the only way to be applicable to every species, including humans, and even then it can still only apply to males. Why? Well, anisogamy, or not equal marriage, is the state of having two different kinds of gametes, the small one and the big one. By the most theoretical definition, males produce the small ones and females produce the big ones, which essentially butterflies into every single difference between the sexes. Yes, now I have to give my disclaimer about how transphobia is bad. This video is about basic to intermediate biology, no advanced stuff. Sex is different from gender, and for the most part, anyone who doesn't follow a sexual binary is sterile and therefore not part of the effective population. But let's get into the meat of it. In theory, female is the more default condition. It certainly makes more sense to think of asexual lineages as all female rather than all male. You don't have to think of them as either, but it certainly explains why males act so weirdly, evolutionarily speaking. Sex in and of itself is kind of a mystery because a male being unable to bear children is a massive drag on population growth. More importantly to this video, it also means that males are really heavily dependent on females for erection, which creates a whole new type of natural selection called sexual selection. Let's look at an example in some hypothetical bird species, Epidendavus sylvivore. Because eggs are so large and have to be carried internally, and a yolk shell and allantois need to be produced, the female only has the energy to produce one egg a year, hence the name. Now, the goal of natural selection, actually maybe that's the reverse of how we should look at it. The natural selection of a goal. No. Under the framework of natural selection, strategies that succeed are to have as many copies of yourself as possible, which in the simplest example is just to have as many offspring as possible. How do each of the sexes accomplish this? Well, in contrast to eggs, which are very expensive, sperm is very cheap, so while the females produce one egg every year, the males produce 50 billion sperm cells a year, which, believe it or not, is a conservative estimate. So the best case scenario for a male is that he impregnates every female. In a population of 400 mature females, he has 400 offspring, and as a side effect, no other male has any offspring at all. Because females provide the limiting factor in egg production, males play a zero-sum game. You can't make a female produce more eggs than she's able to, so each male has two goals: mate with as many females as possible, and don't let any other males mate with another female. This brings us into the second sign of a fake alpha: homophobia. A real alpha male would be overjoyed to see competition reduced. In fact, he would actively encourage other males towards homosexuality. A beta male encourages you to be an alpha. An alpha male encourages you to be a beta. A zebra male kicks your pregnant wife until she miscarries. But back to the female birds. In this model, they really only have two outcomes: have an egg or don't, which means the model has to go deeper to address the actual selective pressures. So out of all the eggs laid, not all of them will make it to adulthood. Ensuring you have the most offspring that make it to maturity is the female equivalent of this struggle, so to speak. Males have to worry about that too, but it's not as significant as the other pressure. So, how do you ensure that the most offspring make it to maturity? Well, maternal care and feeding the offspring, but that's not really sexual selection. The obvious way this manifests is that females are very picky and only mate with the most fit male, ensuring the 50% of their genes that they pass on are bonded by 50% of the dominant genes, or whatever ensures fitness. Now, this is kind of awkward because fitness is defined partially by being desirable for mating, and we end up with the statement, the most females mate with the male that mates with the most females, which is a meaningless circular statement. But the conflict between the sexes can still kind of be resolved with males fighting over who's the strongest and females choosing the stronger ones. Furthermore, male offspring share 50% of the mother's DNA and bring it into their mating selections. So, and evolutionary biologists love using this word, it behooves the female to select exactly the sort of male that's good at being selected. Now, underlying all of this is the fact that females have to actually be able to select which male they're mating with. Broadcast spawners don't often have meaningful sexual dimorphism. That's also why sexual coercion sounds like a good idea in the short term, but there's an overwhelming purifying selection against it. The entire species is more fit when females can choose who they mate with, although it obviously depends, and it can be an adaptive peak they get stuck in, but that's a relevant third sign of a fake alpha male is promoting rape. Now, when we're talking about good ideas and evolutionary plans, the female doesn't really conceive of any of this. She just has attraction programmed into her for certain traits that have proved themselves advantageous in past generations. Some notable examples occur when such a trait stops being advantageous or overshoots a point where it's advantageous, called fishery and runaway, which is why the fourth sign of a fake alpha male is moderation. If someone tells you to be disciplined or like you should regulate your life or something, they're probably just a grifter. Real alpha males embrace fishery and run away, spend all their money on a fancy car, spend all their time having sex, die at age 30 when their sperm count is starting to drop anyways. Oh, but Zinniop, your beta voice cries out to me. Isn't that how the Irish elk ended up extinct? Well, first of all, modern research thinks it had more to do with climate change than specifically the overgrown antlers. Also, hominids were causing the extinction of lots of megafauna. Megaloceros probably could have course corrected if we hadn't shown up. But female sexual selection gets even more complicated, obviously because not every species is an elephant seal with a whole beachmaster setup where only one male mates with like 50 females. Why? Well, let's look at one of the males who doesn't succeed. In a population of 10 females, one male gets 9 out of the 10 eggs and another male only gets 1. Each of the females get 1 egg. The crux of this setup is that doesn't vary, except I was actually lying. An advanced technique where I don't tell the truth. The quote was maternal care and feeding the offspring. That's not really sexual selection, but it can be if the female forces the male to do it. This is kind of an extended phenotype, but not really. So, expand this out into 8 mating seasons, assuming they mate for life or the dominant male is otherwise not shaken from his position of dominance. The non-dominant male is kind of screwed. But the thing is, if there's a significant premature mortality, he can also improve his weight in the effective population via paternal care and feeding the offspring. Now, being this male is still the preferable stage. Unfortunately, 36 eggs from 9 females is still better than 8 eggs from 1 female. However, having 8 eggs is better than having 4, so females overwhelmingly prefer this strategy. We have opposing goals, and the females win out because they control the eggs. That's how we ended up with monogamy. Females select for a male that can maximize the potential of their limited eggs. So, why do we still have polygynous species? Well, it can't even be that simple, because females have male offspring and males have female offspring, so dominant males are selecting against themselves by producing female offspring that desire males that don't give paternal care, and females are selecting against themselves by mating with a non-alpha male, and so depriving their male offspring of whatever heritable traits are associated with alphaness. So, which one ultimately wins out? I mean, as you can tell from the fact that both strategies are in use, it just kind of depends on the exact conditions. Sometimes we got polygyny, sometimes we got monogamy. Like I've been saying, different species are only superficially comparable under the framework of an alpha, which is why the 5th sign of a fake alpha male is standing out. True alpha males don't innovate. They just do what everyone else is doing, because obviously that's what works. They only avoid moderation by raising whatever everyone else is doing to an insane degree. True alpha males are leaders not by choice, but because there are people behind them that they're desperately trying to stay ahead of. Perhaps literally. So to recap, a fake alpha male is 1. Self-proclaimed, 2. Homophobic, 3. Sexist and or rapey, 4. Disciplined, and 5. Unique. And of course the most obvious trait that they lack horns. All true alpha males have some sort of mineralized protrusion from their head, could be horns, antlers, maybe tusks like a babirusa, stag beetle type mouth parts, whatever. There's a reason we use the word horny to refer to when people want to have sex, which is of course what alphas do. If someone is talking about being an alpha and they don't have something sharp sticking out of their head, they're just being deeply unserious. Conversely, we can find the 6 signs of a true alpha male. They are 1. Humble, 2. Very encouraging of homosexual behavior, 3. A simp, 4. Barely have a life outside of their relationships, 5. Follow a preset plan for their life, and 6. Have horns.